You walked in with a feminine drink that you want to take a picture of. Did I get that right?
Oh my goodness, I'll never hear the end of it.
That was everybody?
Good.
So before we dive in, because we're going to have lots of fun today, tell me what questions, concerns, issues that I can help address, answer, respond to for anybody about anything. None required. I'm just asking. Yes, go ahead, Julie.
So these are a couple which you may address at a different point, but they're coming up during studying.
Okay.
And rental fee disclosure, do we have one of those or do we go over them?
Sure, it's called the exclusive right to rent agreement.
Okay, perfect. And then I had a question about net listing. So it said that that's a way to lose your license for net listing. I guess my question is why, because it says there's no commission offered or just like nothing. You're not supposed to take it unless there's a specified commission. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. So you know what a net commission is?
No.
I hear one no. I hear two no's.
Yeah.
Okay. Jessica's going to explain it to us.
Oh, God. I think it's when you say whatever you sell, if you sell it for a certain amount, I'll get this amount of money. I can't explain it. Well, you can get any commission you guys both negotiate on. So if you say I want $20,000 in commission, you can get that. But I think it's dependent on what you sell a property for.
So net commission is you sell it for X and you get to keep the rest.
Right.
That's basically
Sorry,
it.
I couldn't
Okay.
say it. So,
For legal, so.
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, anything over $300,000 is my commission. Like you sell the house for, I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say the house is $400,000. The seller comes in and says you sell it for $350,000. Anything over $350,000 is yours.
So you can't do that.
You can't do that.
Is it every state that's illegal?
I don't know. I am only licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. I don't think it's legal in both.
You have that for the tax, or it's illegal.
Okay. Yes.
One more question, sorry.
Yeah.
So I was getting confused on the mortgagor and the mortgagee, and I know or is the giver and E is the receiver, but since you're taking money from the bank, I would think that you'd be the mortgagee, but are you the mortgagor because you owe them money?
Well, say that again.
So because you're getting the loan from the bank and then you have to pay them back, do you end up being the mortgagor? I'm probably saying it wrong. TOR, not E.
Well, Jessica says yes, so we're going to have her explain again.
Okay.
I've heard this so much because it confused me too, but like you're the mortgagor because you're paying the bank and then the bank becomes the mortgagee. It's the
Okay.
only scenario where the E is the receiver and the or is, it's like.
But the or is the giver, right? Because if you're the
Mhm.
mortgagor, you're paying the
bank.
bank.
But I see how it could be like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because when I was
Yeah.
reading it, everything made sense. And then I was like, wait a second, that does make sense, but is it because of this? And I just wanted to clarify. So thank you.
So
Yeah.
that sounds right.
Okay.
I'd have to go double check. I haven't used it and thought of it in those terms in years. So
Prep agent explains it really well.
prep agent,
Yeah.
go to prep agent.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Any other questions?
Silly question, but when I was studying, there was like something that came up about a life estate that really confused me because the way they explained it was saying that the person whose life it is, they're the life tenant.
Yep.
But then they went and explained it a different way where they said it doesn't matter if it's the person's life, it's the person that's living in the house is called the life tenant. Do you have any?
Yeah, generally the way that it works, and again, I don't know that I've ever seen it in my career other than hearing about it. I've never seen actual examples of it, so the likelihood you're going to run into it is pretty limited. My understanding, and again, I'm gonna coach this by saying I would need to double check for you to verify it. Is basically the life estate, the life tenant is a person living in the property.
Okay.
But generally, the way that it works is it's the person that owned the property, they've set up, I think that's a trust, and within the trust, the trust goes out of their ownership, so the ownership is somewhere over here, but as part of that, they're given a life estate, and that means that they're allowed to live for the entirety of their life in that property. So there's a little bit of a legal complication when you go to closing to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. But again, it's not for us it's for you to know in terms of the test, and that's probably about it.
Yeah.
All right, like riparian rights, do you guys remember riparian rights?
Yeah, with the river.
Rivers.
Used it once.
You have to know the doctrine of, or someone out west, I don't know, how there's water.
Little.
No, yeah, but that's.
Okay. All right. So who has not had the pleasure of doing the exclusive right to buy agreement presentation? Luch, have you? So,
We don't remember my palm of it.
everybody else has done it, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I should have been like, yeah, I did it. You wouldn't have known.
I started rewriting bullet
But I think
notes.
it's setting up issue 5.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the
Well, you're interested. Christine, if that was trustworthy.
Okay.
I thought he was the first one up.
No.
Who's the first one to explain the commission paragraph?
All right.
I drink my girly drink here.
So I'm glad that you decided to work with me. And before we actually get going,
I haven't yet, but that's okay.
before we actually get the process started, I just need your signature on this. So this is the exclusive right to buy agreement. Oh, sweet. That was easy. All right, I'm done. That's it. Forgot to tell you it was 10%.
Yeah.
So this top section here is basically just saying, who you are, what you're looking for, the different price range, locations, and whatnot. The section under that states that my team works with clients in New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
So if you decided to do something in New Hampshire, we could definitely help you with that as well. The first paragraph talks about services. So this is kind of a reiteration of the state agency disclosure that we went over,
Okay.
about the fiduciary responsibility and all that. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
All right. The next section is the duration. So our standard is 6 months. Sometimes it might take a little bit longer. Sometimes it'll take shorter. Really depends on the market and specifically what you're looking for and how hard it is to find that. Does that make sense?
So it's how long? 6 months?
6 months.
Okay. And that's because why? Because
So
I'm not a
especially-
big fan of 6 months. How about 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, you might close on a place in 3 months, but the market that we're in, typically, say you were to go find a property tomorrow and we write an offer and it gets accepted, the closing wouldn't even be for 3 months, most likely. So that's if you find a property tomorrow. You see why 6 months would really cover us in case there's any delays?
I don't, actually.
Well, I mean, I don't want to work with you then.
See ya.
Um,
Anybody else want to work with me? I'm only a $3 million buyer.
Yeah, so I mean, so if you're a $3 million buyer, have you seen how many homes are listed for $3 million in the market?
Yeah, I have, actually.
There's not too many right now, and finding something that's going to fit your needs, it's definitely going to be a lot harder, and the process will be a lot longer to actually secure that $3 million property.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, just as an aside, the average closing time from time of accepted offer to close is 45 to 60 days. It's been running closer to 45 days for most of the year, but I'm comfortable with you saying if you're going to quote a time frame, 45 to 60 days.
Sounds good.
Sorry.
So the next section is the buyer's obligations. So remember when I said this was a partnership?
Mm-hmm.
So I have responsibilities to you as your agent, but you also have responsibilities to me. For example, say you're driving down the road and you find a property that you're interested in seeing. You can't just walk into that property, talk to that agent, and then, have them work with you. If you see that, it's kind of your obligation to tell me about that property, because I might not be driving down that road on that day and see that there's a coming soon sign since it's not an MLS yet. Same with new construction. Does that make sense?
It does, but I have responsibilities to you. What
Yeah.
about the responsibilities to myself?
Well, so that, you also have responsibilities to yourself to
Oh,
do
okay.
your due diligence.
Yeah.
And that's the other part of this paragraph. It basically says that
It's like I've read this before.
almost, you're very
Mhm.
familiar with it.
Mhm.
It's because I've done so many transactions with you in the past.
Right.
Your responsibility is any due diligence outside of the bounds of the property. And then for me, I'm going to give you all the information and I'll really help you figure out everything within the bounds of the property. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I have questions about the town, or if I have questions about stuff outside the bounds, I can't ask you?
You can ask me whatever you want. I'll be glad to help as much as I can with any questions that you have. But for specific information on zoning or taxes or different things like that, I might have to point you in the direction of somebody who can answer that 100% accurately. I would just never want to give you advice on something that I'm not confident on, that I'm not a professional for.
Right.
Does that make
And then
sense?
you said within the bounds of the property, I need to ask you, right?
You don't need to ask me anything, but
Okay,
I'll be
so-
able to help you with that.
Okay, so can I put a pool inside the backyard?
So I could definitely contact the sellers that lived here before, and I could see if they've ever explored that option.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to go to the town for that, and I'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction with that as far as getting permits and whatnot.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
sure.
So the next section here is my responsibility to you. So the first paragraph was labeled services. I like to think about this one more as my services to you. And when you hire me, you get my market knowledge, my negotiation skills, everything else that we do at this company, all of the marketing materials I showed you. This is saying that you get all that by working with me.
But I'm buying a house. Are you preparing marketing materials for me for the house I'm buying?
So not necessarily marketing materials for you, but we use marketing materials to find sellers, maybe before they're even thinking about selling. So we work with Zillow, we work with all the big networks, and we have predictive analytics that actually helps us find people who are interested in selling their house before they even list it or even talk to an agent.
Okay.
Can you see why that might benefit you?
I guess.
Yeah, especially in the competitive market, it's really important to help find off-market listings so there's not as much competition.
So just as an aside, that good catch, right? Good to be able to respond. What I like about what he's doing is he's taking what I'm asking and kind of turning it back on me, or at least giving me an explanation. I'd be a little weary about, just to recap it real quick, I'd be a little leery about saying that my obligation to you has something to do with marketing materials, because it really doesn't. But my obligation to you is to help you find the right house within the time frame that you're looking for, within the price range that you're looking for. And I'm going to leverage all of my, both my market knowledge and negotiating skill and that of my office, as well as other resources.
Yeah.
And kind of keep it very, very high level. And the responsibilities are to either, the responsibility is really to the transaction. The buyer doesn't have a responsibility to you. Their responsibility is really to themselves to do their due diligence, not mess around with other people in terms of exclusivity and things like that. And your responsibility is both to the buyer and to the transaction. So I would keep it at a higher level and get less specific when you're doing this.
Sure.
That's okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sorry, keep going.
So paragraph 5 talks about how this is an exclusive right to buy agreement. So by signing this, say you go and find a property and you don't tell me about it and you sign an offer and you work with another agent.
Yep.
You would still owe me the commission for that because this is an exclusive. And I don't want you to have to go pay another agent a commission.
Okay.
And I don't think you would want to do that either. Does that make sense why this is exclusive?
It does, yes. I generally like to, again, focus on the exclusivity is more related to the commitment that you need to make to me, so that I in turn will make the commitment to you, right? Because you're asking me to do what? You're asking me to spend time, money, and energy to help you, and I'm not going to get paid until somewhere down here when the property closes, but there's a whole lot of work that goes in between.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for that bilateral commitment, you to me and me to you, to be able to get me there. Without that commitment, I have to be mindful of my time and give my time to others that are willing to commit to me. if that makes sense.
That's right. Okay. The next section is actually my favorite section, and that's because this is how I get paid. So our standard here is 3%, and that just includes all of my services to you. And say we go and find a property in MLS, they're only offering at 2%. Because the contract's for 3%, that extra 1% would be owed by you at closing. Does that make sense?
It does. So what happens is it possible that we might find somebody that doesn't offer, we find a property where they're not offering anything and I'm having
Yeah,
to
I
pay the
mean,
full 3%?
There's always a chance of that, and it's very unlikely that they would be offering out no percentage. If we ever come into that situation, I'm always going to let you know ahead of time before even showing you the property. And anything that we can do, my job is to get you the property for the least amount of money out of your pocket. And if I can offset even my
Inclusive of your fee.
inclusive of my fee,
Yep.
and if I could offset even part of my fee to the sellers, then I'm going to do my best to do that too. Does that make sense?
It does.
So the next section is about the broker's role, so disclosure. This is basically saying that whenever I'm talking to any sellers or sellers agents, I have to let the whole world know that I'm working for you as your buyer's agent. Does that make sense?
Yep.
The next section basically says that I'm not hired as a property inspector, zoning expert, tax advisor, attorney, et cetera, and I don't play one on TV, as my manager used to always say. And
He wears that one out quite a lot.
yeah, he does. So non-designated agency. This is basically what I was telling you about, how when you hire me, you get my whole team,
Right.
30 years of experience. Consent to dual agency. That's basically saying that you're aware that we may run into a situation where there's a dual agency in place. Does that make sense to you?
Is it an awareness, and why is it called consent?
So this is basically you giving your consent and being aware that it could happen, and if it does happen, that I'll notify you in writing, and I'll actually have you sign something called a dual agency disclosure, and we'll go over that later on if that does happen. Does that make sense?
It does. So just as an aside, for when we're explaining that paragraph, I want you to think in terms of what we talked about in terms of the three elements of dual agency in Massachusetts, which are what? Disclosure, consent, notification, right? So if in my explanation I say something to the effect of, the law requires me to make sure that you're aware of what dual agency is. And if you'll recall, we talked about it here on the Massachusetts Mandatory Real Estate Licensing Consumer Relationship Disclosure Form. And you'll recall that dual agency is when my office is representing the buyer and the seller. We're representing both parties in the transaction. The consent portion, which is what we're talking about here, is just your acknowledgement, not only that you're aware of it, but you're consenting to the possibility that it might happen. Because it might happen, it might not happen. And it says further in here that if it does happen, I have an obligation to let you know about it. And not only am I going to tell you verbally, but I'm going to get you in writing. And if you think about how I just explained it, didn't I just cover the disclosure, the consent, and the notification process?
Yeah.
Right, so it just makes them more aware of it, more comfortable with it, that's all. So I don't think you did anything bad, I just like to highlight those points.
Yeah. The next section is declaration of agency. This is basically a little spot where you're saying to me that you're not in any current exclusive contracts with any agents. You don't have any that have in
Right,
in the process. Next section it says that I work with other buyers, my team works with other buyers, and there's a very rare chance that I could show you a property and someone else on my team can show their buyer the same property. If that ever happens, then we'll deal with it then. But I wasn't even going to say that, so I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I would keep it very matter of fact. Hey, we represent lots of people. It's possible that we represent more than just you in the same price range in the same town. So it's possible we might be showing others, and just kind of let it go. And if they have questions, address it. If they don't, don't.
That's right. Equal opportunity. We don't discriminate any protected classes about fair housing laws. It includes sex, age, marital status, handicap, etc.
I have a service dog. What about that?
So if you have a service dog, that's totally fine. And I actually know a lot of people that do have service dogs. And
Legitimate service dog. Mine's a legitimate service dog.
what makes yours a legitimate service dog?
I got a certificate off the internet.
Oh yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Well, congratulations. Do you want a cookie? You
How
can
about
give it
my
to your dog. Entire agreement and modifications there. This is basically saying that anything in the four corners, front, back, this is the agreement.
Mhm.
Unless in writing, we have an addendum to it,
Mhm.
signed by both me and you,
Okay.
for any modifications to it.
Okay.
And then assignment, this basically says that you can't take this contract and hand it to somebody else, have them sign their name on it, and then make it transferred from you to them. So this contract's always with me and with you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Perfect. So if I just have you sign here and then put your information below, we'll get started.
I'll let my attorney read it and let me know.
That's too bad. You're gonna have to waste money on him.
Hi. It's my brother's sister. So could you do me a favor? Could you bring up MLS
Yeah.
and share the screen with Julie so that she sees it as well? And what I want to do for the purposes of, we're going to jump into writing offers now. We're going to go through the offer form in terms of what the different timeframes mean and so on and so forth. But I always like to try and do this with a real live example. And I have a pretty good real live example that I'm living through right now. That I love as well.
I'm just gonna excuse myself, I forgot my glasses.
Okay, no problem. Good work in there.
For the notice of dual agency, does that, I guess I haven't seen that. And would that be a signature from both me and the client again?
It's a, I'll go get you one. You need my password?
Yeah. Which one's yours?
Twins at 1996 with a capital P.
Is yours the 2928?
Oh, thank you.
This is a notice of dual agency. We'll hold it up to the camera for Julie. Since I'm not near a computer, I can't email it to you.
For some reason it's not on.
Thank you.
All right, or better yet, let's do this.
You can take a picture of it.
No, you know what I can do? Are we signed in?
Can you take a picture of it, Julie?
I can take a picture
Yeah,
of
take a
it.
picture of it and just text it
Oh,
to us.
yeah.
How's that? Brilliant. That's what you. Are we sharing already?
Yep.
Okay, so,
You can see it, right, Julie?
Yes.
can you see the screen, Joe? Okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Fetching our location. I must have hit something there. Sweet. It sure is. Did you send that to her?
Did you get it, Julie?
Yes, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, so notice of dual, this is a notice of dual agency, okay? Again, it's a colored piece of paper, so you know it's important. What's important to identify on here is you identify midway down the property address, then you are printing and signing your name as the representative, the seller is printing and signing their names, the buyer is printing and signing their names. This needs to be attached to an offer to purchase. It should not be given any later than that. It can be given sooner. So generally, the standard of practice that I'd like to see you do is to say, hey, Mr. Mispire, you want to go see XYZ Main Street. You do realize that's one of our listings here at the office. So that means if you go see it, and ultimately if you decide to buy it, then we are going to be in that thing called dual agency, okay? If you decide that you are going to buy it when we write the offer, we're actually going to attach an additional piece of paper to that offer called a notice of dual agency, where we'll identify the property, we'll identify that me as the agent, and we're going to put your name and you're going to sign, and then that's going to be given to the seller with the offer so that they can print their name and sign so that both parties are acknowledging that that we're in this thing called disclosed dual agency. Make sense? Okay.
Why does it say optional?
It's never optional. Well, they can always decide not to sign it, at which point you wouldn't be able to practice what? Dual agency.
I'm sorry, where does it say to list the address? I see the signatures.
Does the,
Sorry.
type the property description here?
It's under description.
So. Julie over there. All right, so what I want you to do is take a look at this listing, because this is a listing I've written an offer on. Okay, so the story goes like this. Property came on the market came on the market 12 days ago. I took the buyers to see it last Friday night. There was an open house there. We went right before the beginning of the open house. As we were leaving, the listing agent was there. We asked him a few questions. Hey, how are things going? Notice that this is your second or third open house. Yeah, we've had a lot of activity. There's a couple people circling around, but nobody's pulled the trigger yet. Okay, the operative thing to note right now is the town is what? Reading. Okay, the price is $519, and I don't know of a single property in the last couple of years under $600,000 or $700,000 in Reading that hasn't gone under multiple offers in like the first day or two. Okay, if you're not familiar with John Street, John Street connects basically the cut-through street. It takes you from Salem or from downtown Reading out to, if you know where Jordan's is, Jordan's Furniture is, that's the main street to get there. So it doesn't have a double yellow line, but it probably should. There are lots of stop signs, but it's a relatively busy street. As you can tell by the picture here, the property does sit up on a little bit of a knoll. Okay, let's just flip through this a little bit for you. The driveway here where the cursor is, Julie, can you see the cursor?
Yes.
We're moving. So there's a 5-foot easement. Does everybody remember what an easement is? Okay, what's an easement?
Somebody has a monthly property.
So there's an easement that was granted from this property to the abutter many years ago because it was an older couple that did not have a driveway, and the easement was granted so that if an ambulance needed to come to pick up the older couple, they could do so. I don't know why you'd need an easement for that, because you'd think that, anyway.
Yeah.
So there's this easement in place. Since then, the easement that people have since moved, the new people have put a driveway on the other side. The easement's kind of not being used, but it's still in place. Just giving you these fun facts. So here's the property itself. Just taking a look at it on the inside, you'll see that it's in pretty nice condition.
They got shiplap.
They do. Joanna Gaines.
Yeah.
Okay. No central air.
How's this supposed to be 519?
What's that?
It's like actually only 519 or?
Only 519. 1,400 square feet, 3-bedroom. And we're back. So what else do we know about the property? So it's a 7-room, 3-bedroom, 2 full baths. So there's a full bath on the first floor, full bath on the second floor. A little over 1,400 square feet. It's radiators, hot radiators by gas. No central AC, but 3 walls. The driveway easement with the neighbor we just talked about. 91 John owns the driveway, parking at the top of the driveway, so there's no garage. There's the description of the rest of it. Let's see what else it tells us. See attachments for information. We'll go into that for a second. Subject to seller finding suitable housing, property has been identified. What does that mean?
Basically, you want?
Nope, you can't answer.
Yeah.
Somebody else answer.
Does it just mean that the seller already has a house that they want to buy?
Subject to seller finding suitable housing. What does that mean?
Oh,
The condition
It's a condition. What does it mean? You're right, but what does it?
until, once the seller finds a house that they want, then they can release that home. But until then, the deal's not going to close.
Right, okay, and they're also saying that the property's been identified. Okay, again, it's been on the market for 12 days, which is an eternity right now in Reading of all places. So that's the backstory of the offer. So I've said to you, and part of what I want to address in this whole thing about the offer is that your offer needs to tell a story. Okay, so I'm going to keep this in the back of your mind, and I'm going to come back and I'm actually going to pull up the offer, the original offer that we wrote after we go through the offer form right now. So Julie, do you have the offer form that has in paragraph A, paragraph 2, the letter A, the letter B, letter C, so on and so forth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so that's what we're going to go over right now, and then we'll come back to this. So I think the date, we talked a little bit about the date, the address, the lot size is only there if it's a single-family piece of property or a multifamily piece of property, it's not going to be there if you're writing an offer on a condo because there's probably some common ownership and it's just not defined that way. The book and the page, where do you find the book and the page? On the public record, usually. Sometimes it's zeroed out, meaning it isn't there. Don't stress yourself out if it's not on there. It's preferred to be there. At some point, we'll add it in. But don't, if you're in a rush to get an offer out because of an offer deadline, then submit it without it. You identify the list office. Who's the list office? You identify us as the selling office or the office working with the buyer. And then you get to paragraph 1, which is the price and the deposits and the transfer of money. So you, line 1, the unnumbered line or the unlettered line is the purchase price that the buyer is offering. Line 2 is the deposit. We said the deposit should be what? A dollar amount, but what's the common? $1,000. It can be whatever. Okay, so let me give you some scenarios. Why would it be less? Is it possible the buyers don't have a lot of cash? VA loan. VA loan, why? Because most VA loans, not all VA loans, but most VA loans are able to be 100% financing. And so all the money that they would put in would have to come back to them at closing. So you don't want to be putting down $40,000 or $50,000 so that you're having that kind of money transfer back at closing. It gets frowned upon. The lender won't even allow it. But so it can be, I have done offers where we have had $100 for the offer and $100 for the purchase and sale because it was VA financing. Okay. I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend, that was many years ago. I'd probably recommend something a little bit more substantial, but not so much that it's overwhelming, not much more than 1% to 2% in total, if it's a VA. You might also be at 500 or less than 1,000, again, just because the purchase price of the property, it might be a $50,000 small parcel, small tract of land in New Hampshire that you're buying, right? And again, I'm just saying New Hampshire, but keeping this within Massachusetts, a small parcel of land within Massachusetts. The second deposit, so the first deposit is earnest money deposit. It's a show of good faith, right? Because it's going with what? The offer. When does it get cashed?
When you receive something written by an attorney or a bank.
I like the idea that something's written. What else should be? When does that check get cashed?
Technically, like you mean put it into the escrow? I mean, technically it's put into the escrow right away.
Oh, that would be cashing it into the escrow, right?
So you mean like cash?
Cash or deposit? Let's say, when does it get deposited? How's that?
At closing?
Because if I'm a buyer and I give you a check, the money's still in my account. At some point, the money's going to be transferred out of my account. When does that happens when it gets deposited, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a check needs to be surrendered. So number one, it's a rare day, unless it's an in-house deal, that you're going to actually submit the original check with the offer. You can. I don't say you can't. Customarily, there's that word again. You don't. You send over a copy of it. Make sure you block out, write this down, block out the account number and the routing number on the bottom of the check, just for security purposes. But assuming that you're writing an offer for your buyer, it's an outside office, you would just, when you send over the offer, you're going to send over a copy of that check. You're really trying to make a statement, hand deliver the offer with an original check. That will let the sellers know you're really serious. Okay? The second deposit is with the purchase and sale, and customarily that's what in this area? Do we know what amount that is?
5%.
The balance of 5%. Okay? Again, like the other first deposit, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a flat amount. It can be a percentage. Generally, if the buyer's down payment, I don't want don't let the deposits ever exceed the amount of the buyer's down payment. And don't do what I did on my very first deal that you'll talk about for the next 20 years like I'm doing right now. Don't sit with your buyer, who was your buyer client, and say, okay, what's your down payment? They say 20%, and you put down 20% as a deposit. Why would I not want to do that?
There's a chance you're not get it back.
There's a chance that it could get lost. And how are you going to look your clients in in the eyes and say, oh, by the way, I'm sorry you lost your 20% deposit versus
That
a
ended up
5%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen a deposit lost, so, other than
No, I
maybe
mean, in that
$1,000.
situation, when you did the 20%.
The sale went through, but
Oh.
yeah, it's not, I didn't realize it until after the purchase and sale was signed, and they were first-time home buyers, so they didn't know any better. So that's why I go to these types of pains to have these conversations now, and that's why no one is ever going to submit an offer in this room without me first looking at it before it gets submitted.
And the 5% is with like letter B?
Would be letter B. Yep.
Just making sure.
Yep, no, thank you, good question.
Is the 5% based on the purchase price or after the $1,000 deposit or other amount?
Based on the gross amount, the purchase price. Okay, I usually write it as balance of 5%, meaning I've already put $1,000 in, so it's 5% minus $1,000 is what it means.
So you actually write in balance 5%, you're
I
writing the
do.
dollar amount?
I do.
Okay.
I generally don't write a dollar amount, and here's why. Because it's possible that through the negotiations, the price changes. It's just one more thing to have to change if you do a straight dollar amount.
Okay.
Okay?
So balance of, this is just balance of 5% of the purchase price.
Correct.
Okay.
You just write balance of 5%, it's fine. Okay? But the critical thing you need to write down, remember, and never do is never let the total amount of the deposits exceed the buyer's down payment. What does that mean? Example, the total of the deposit's 5%, but you're an FHA buyer and their down payment is 3.5%. Because A, they probably don't have the money, and B, it's just gonna screw everything up at the closing if you can even get it closed. Okay? If the buyer is putting 20% down, 30% down, 40% down, it doesn't matter in terms of the deposits. The deposit should not exceed 5%. The only time I've seen it exceed 5%, one of two scenarios. One, it's new construction and the builder requires a total of 10%. Very rare, but it does happen. Two, you felt that that was somehow the only way that your buyer's offer was ever going to get accepted was with a higher deposit. I don't like to use that because when you put that money down, that money is at risk if the buyer breaches or fails to perform. And do you really want to have that conversation with your buyer that, I'm sorry, we told you to put 10% down, but you inadvertently breached the contract and now you don't get to keep that, you don't get that money back.
I think I missed this part, but
Okay.
when you said send a copy of the check instead of sending the actual check and block out the account number and the routing number.
Yep.
When would they ask for the account number and the routing number? Like when would they?
They're never going to ask for it. What's going to happen is you are going to be required under state escrow laws to surrender the deposit within 24 hours of the offer being accepted, which is, how is that evidenced? How is an offer being accepted evidence? When do you have an accepted offer?
Signed by both parties.
Signed by both parties. And as soon as it comes back into your possession, because we're assuming in this case you're working with the buyer, that check needs to be delivered within 24 hours. Because it has to be deposited within 24 hours. You do not want to be standing up in front of a judge and saying, well, there's a deposit dispute because, let's see, the buyer's offer got accepted and it was 2 weeks later that I gave them the deposit, the deposit to deposit. Okay. The balance is paid at closing. It's paid in closing. When I say the balance, what do I mean? Well, if I've got a 20% down payment, we put 5% down as deposit, so there's already 5% into the transaction. I have to bring an additional 15%, which is the balance of my down payment, correct? 5% plus 15%. And the bank is going to bring the additional 80%. So at closing, you'll see that it says here that the balance of this, it's all delivered at closing and how it's going to be delivered. Okay. One important question to ask or confirm is once an offer is accepted, before you get to purchase and sale, there are offices like ours that require the purchase and sale deposit to be a bank deposit. Okay? Not all. right? It's possible, not all offices require it. That's more of an office policy versus a universal law or regulation. I will tell you that if the closing is less than 3 weeks, make it a cashier's check for sure. If it's more than that, it might be okay as a personal check, but check with the listing agent. Last thing you want to do is surrender a personal check and then somebody's calling you saying, I need a bank. It's a pain in the ass. So just know it up front.
We require a cashier's check from a buyer, or we require our agents to only give cashier's checks?
We require it from buyers.
So when it's on our listings, we require the deposit, the purchase and sale deposit to be a bank check or certified funds. I'll take a wire. I don't care. I just don't want a personal check. Because there are rare circumstances when checks bounces because people forget to transfer money or whatever the reason. Okay, but remember, because the acceptance of those money and the deposits of those monies are evidence of a buyer's and seller's intent, the cashing or depositing of those funds can have some significant legal meaning. Let me give you an example. So 10, 15 years ago, we had let me give you the full example because it involves a couple things, a couple different scenarios. So we actually started talking about it in the meeting the other day. Lillian listed a property over on Ross Lane in Middleton. It was owned by two mortgage brokers. So that was always a lot of fun because they always know more than you do. No offense to your boyfriend.
No.
And so as we were going through this was in the downswing of the market. So I don't remember if it was 2008 or 2009, whatever it was, the price was very aggressive. We got the 1 in a million buyer after being on the market for quite a while. We got the 1 in a million buyer. I think we had it listed for $1.7 million, and we got it negotiated to $1.6 million. The buyer was putting 50% down. We knew, Lillian and I knew, and Lillian was traveling, so that means that Eric knew, because he was handling it for her, that the market had really taken a dip. And we were very concerned about the appraisal. So we negotiated into the offer that the offer was not subject to the appraisal, which is that language that we talked about at the meeting. For those of you that were there, that is the transaction that language came from. So we put that language in the offer about the appraisal. And basically what it said was, it said, this offer is not subject to an appraisal because we knew it would never comp out at 1.6 because there were no comps. Okay? Probably a good thing because ultimately it appraised at $1.3 million. So the buyer had to come up with $300,000. Okay? But here's what it relates to in terms of deposit. So the seller's attorney, somebody that they knew and trusted, who I will tell you was probably one of the biggest knuckleheads I ever met, when they were negotiating the purchase and sale, and this is operative for you guys to know, and this is why we tell you to read the purchase and sale to be familiar with it. So we had this very specific language that we crafted into the offer. That language got modified into the purchase and sale and basically said, there was some debate as to what it was. So there was a couple drafts that had been around of the purchase and sale. One of them basically said, there is an appraisal or under a certain amount, the buyer could walk away. There was some, and the seller's attorney was really allowing it to happen, which was pretty interesting considering it's signed in the offer. Well, there was some confusion on the buyer agent side. The buyer agent had taken the purchase and sale agreement that had the white language in it, and had it signed and dropped the check off. Listen to this one. Dropped the check off in the buyer signed purchase and sale to us, and it was the weekend before. Was it President's Day in February? It's Friday afternoon at 4:00 in the afternoon, ahead of a holiday weekend. And I'm getting calls from the buyer's attorney saying, no, we don't agree to the language. The buyers are not going to sign that, even though I had a buyer sign P&S and their check, okay? And the P&S also stated that the seller's attorney was going to be the escrow agent, but the check was made payable to us. I get on the phone with the seller's attorney and say, here's the issue. The buyer's attorney is saying that they're refusing to sign. I'm telling him, too bad. I didn't realize we had the check and everything then. The seller's attorney said, I'm taking the weekend off, we'll deal with it on Monday. So I learned at that point that we had the buyer sign purchase and sale. I learned that we had the deposit, and here's the discussion I had. Hi, Mr. Seller. I think you need to have a conversation with your attorney, but here's what's going on. Let me explain it to you. You're in this business, so you decide what you want to do. I'm asking that you sign the purchase and sale because the only issue right now is there's a discussion about this language. The language that's in there is exactly what was in the offer. You've already signed it. It's not like you haven't seen it. I've got a check made payable to me. I want your signatures on this document like within minutes. And as soon as you do that, I'm going to go deposit it, even though I'm not the escrow agent. And they agreed, and we did that. That it immediately took the issue of the buyer attorney off the table. Why? Because we had a fully signed executory agreement, and we had the funds in hand, and we deposited the funds, which then shows that there was intent by the buyer to move forward. So you have to be very careful with the timing of all this stuff, okay? And I share these stories with you, again, so that you're aware of why we do the things that we do. Make sense? Am I boring you all to death?
No.
Eric, I have a question. Would you get
Sure.
in trouble the fact that you said you weren't listed as the escrow agent, even though I know you guys have like the office has powers to be an escrow agent? Like that wasn't an issue?
It would have been a little bit of a gray area had we gone to court.
Okay.
But what my argument would have been through our attorneys would be we were acting in the best interest of our seller. The language that was signed off by the buyer was identical to what they had signed in the offer. The attorneys were the ones that were trying to change it, which they are entitled to do, but absent their ability to change it, the buyer indicated that they approved it because they provided what? Their signature on the document. They provided a check. They made it to the wrong escrow agent, but I'm an escrow agent, so we threw it into the account, and as long as I put it in my escrow account, I can at least say that my intent was to follow through and do something in the best interest of my sellers.
Okay.
Okay, and then we promptly, the next week, as soon as it cleared, we transferred the funds to the escrow. Transferring escrow agents is a big deal, but
Okay.
should we have done it? Yeah. It was the only buyer in 6 months on the property. We weren't letting them go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you get into those situations, it's fine, Lily and I, and we'll figure it out, and we'll take those calculated risks on behalf of the brokerage to do the right thing for the client.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So jumping down, going to acceptance, let's talk about what A stands for. So if you go to the back page of this, it talks about that A is the time that the offer expires. Commonly, not in a screaming seller's market and not in a screaming buyer's market, but commonly, if it's an on-balance market or not at the fringe edges of these markets, it's 18 to 24 hours. If I write an offer now at 2:52 and I get it submitted to the listing agent by 4 or 5 o'clock, get me an answer by 4 or 5 o'clock tomorrow. That's okay. That's common and standard, if you will. Again, these are all, there's no laws on these things. It's all, but you're trying to send a message, right? Less if in competitive situations, for example, put 4 to 8 hours for response. So the smallest I've ever done, 1 hour. Okay? They're going to bitch and moan and complain about it. The listing agents always do when you make it a very short time frame, but that's their problem, not yours. It becomes your problem if they don't do it. Okay? Or sometimes you have to be mindful of, which is why you always read MLS, are there any call for offers, and within those call for offers instructions to make the offer good until 4 days from now. If you ever deal with short sales, if you ever deal with foreclosures, there's a possibility that you will have to have an expiration on that offer that could be 72 hours long, could be 5, 6 days, 7 days, or if there's an attorney involved or an estate, you wrote an offer. Congratulations to Louis, you got his first offer accepted. When he wrote it last night, he had a time deadline, and as we were talking about what that meant and getting ready to have to take some action because it was a minute.
It was 11:59 this morning, and the deadline was 12 o'clock. And I walked in Eric's office. I said, "So if they don't respond back, like, what's our strategy?" And we were going over it, and then my phone dinged, and
There it was. And I got
I left it a minute before the deadline.
Wow.
Okay.
Maybe
So-
If it were to go like past 12,
The offer's expired.
right, so then I get that on our end, you could say, well, it's expired, so it doesn't matter, but if they say, well, we want to accept if you still want to make it good, even though it expired, he would just go to his buyer and say, just basically, does he need to draft up another offer, or could he just talk to them and
So
say,
one
okay,
of several things, right? I have certainly seen where people just sign the offer, everybody moves forward with the right intent, with the intent that it's been accepted, right? Regardless of whether the offer was expired before it was signed or not,
okay,
okay? The technically correct perspective would be to change that, have that changed. That could be changed by one of two parties. It could be changed by the buyer, reinitialed by the buyer, resent to the seller, have the seller sign. It could be, the offer could be signed by the seller, modified by the seller, and sent back to the buyer for initials.
okay,
Okay, and I think you have to understand that process, and, you know, there are times where I might dictate how that process works, because timing can be, the time, and you have to be ever so mindful of the time, how the timing impacts your client. Sometimes it's a positive way, sometimes it's a negative way, but you got to be mindful of it. As I shared with Luciano, a lot of what you do when you write an offer or respond to an offer is as much about technical prowess and expertise as it is psychological. You have to recognize that what you say is going to make an impact, it's going to tell them a story, and they're going to react to it accordingly. So if you're trying to, I'm going to use the word manipulate just for description purposes. If you're trying to manipulate what the answer will be, you have to anticipate what are the factors are and how do I get them to do what I want them to do. It sounds terrible, sorry, but that's what you're in the business of trying to do. What? You're smirking.
No, it's just funny.
Is it right, though?
Yeah, I mean, all the time, it's all that it is, psychology.
It's more psychology than anything else. So you will get a master's in psychology by working in this business. So the time frame of the offer is really a function of what's the urgency or lack of urgency, or what are the instructions related to that offer. But it's how long is this offer good till? As I said to Luciano when we were having the discussion, the client can easily say, it's expired, I'm going to withdraw it. Okay, when I wrote the offer for my client a week ago on Carmel, which we knew was going to have multiple offers, the MLS specifically stated that there's an offer deadline on Monday at 5, seller reserves the right to accept an offer prior. So the strategy for my buyer was, okay, we're going to submit an offer on Saturday. There's an open house on Sunday. We'd like a response on Saturday night so that if they accept it, we get them to take it off the market before the open house to avoid the additional onslaught of offers and interest, blah, 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 blah. And so that's the response that's how we wrote that particular offer. We wrote it in such a way that that response had to be by Saturday evening.
Did they accept?
They did not. And so then what we did was we made the offer good until I think it was 8 o'clock on Saturday. We got the response back before 8 o'clock on Saturday. And then we turned around and said on Sunday morning, just for clarity purposes, this offer has been withdrawn. So we didn't want the seller to think that we're kind of leaving it there. And we wanted them to know it was withdrawn, because I didn't want that offer to be sitting there without clarity to be used as a leverage for other offers. How would that be used as leverage? Is that your question?
Sure.
Okay, great. So it would be used as leverage. Think of it. I'm a listing agent. Somebody's made an offer on my property. It's been withdrawn. It hasn't been withdrawn and sitting there. You call me and say, hey, because you're a smart agent, you can say, hey, I have a buyer that's kind of interested. I got a couple questions. One of the questions, do you have any offers on the table? I sure do. And look at that. It's well over asking price. Okay. It could potentially cause other offers to come in. It could scare other offers over, but it could cause other offers to come in, and it could cause them to, right? Because what's my job as a listing agent? Highest and best price, so the best terms and conditions for my seller, right? So
You
yep.
resubmitted it Sunday morning?
No, so even though it
You made sure
expired,
withdrawn.
I said I want to be clear here, this offer is formally withdrawn, please acknowledge it. They acknowledged it. We resubmitted on Monday.
Yeah.
We didn't really change anything, but we resubmitted it. We didn't prevail, but.
Did they accept?
No. we had a house to sell contingency. There was no way they were going to sell it. Right? But also from a psychological perspective, what did I do with my buyers? It was the first offer I wrote for my buyers. I got them to write an offer. Getting your buyer to write the first offer is always the hardest. I hope it's the only one you ever have to write, but if you've written one, it's a whole lot easier to get them to write another offer, right? Because they've been through the decision process. It's no longer an unknown. They've never done it before, blah, 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 blah. So I'd much rather have you write an offer with a buyer. If it doesn't get accepted, I feel bad, but there's a pretty good chance that they're not going anywhere at this point, and you've got a captive audience and you're going to get it done. Okay? Getting that buyer to write an offer is harder to do than you think. Okay? Any questions on the offer acceptance? You change that time span. If there's no urgency, 18 to 24 hours is fine, you know, depending on what time of day. You know, if I were to write one now, I'd probably say, get me an answer by noon tomorrow. You know, that would be okay. Getting me an answer by 9 a.m. tomorrow, a little bit more urgent. Getting me an answer by this evening, 8 or 9 o'clock, very urgent. Okay? Paragraph 3, the inspection clause. If you go and look back on page 4, it says that B is 7 to 10 calendar days of offer acceptance. Julie, we talked a little bit about this last week when you said, is 10 days common practice or the standard?
Right.
14 days, people will tell you it's 10 days, people will tell you it's 14 days. There's a lot of prevailing thought on it. There's a lot of agents out there that think common practice is somehow law or regulation, and you'll submit an offer with 14, you know, with something, and they'll come back and you say, no, it's 10 days. You have to do it. That's the rules. There are no rules. It's an offer.
Okay.
It's whatever you want it to be. And again, you can give the perception of urgency on behalf of your buyer or not. Why would I expand or contract those days? Well, if I have some reason of understanding that we need, if I'm going to be in a multiple offer situation, what is the seller's general typical perception of an offer? I want as much money as I can get, and I want everything to happen as fast as possible, because the faster I get these contingencies over with and extinguished, the more solid my deal is. So I want to get home inspections done fast, I want to get purchase and sales done fast, and I want to get my commitment done as fast as possible. From a buyer's perspective, faster isn't necessarily better. Especially first-time home buyers, I probably want to slow the process down. I probably want to get them 14 days and then a couple days to the purchase and sale, and I want to make it comfortable for them to get the commitment. Okay? So you have to play to the audience and play to the situation. Now, I will tell you, the mitigating factors on inspections are really the availability of inspectors these days, right? The market's so busy, and you call, the buyer doesn't take your recommendation of Dana Wilson Home Inspections, who will prioritize calls on behalf of this office for scheduling, Dana Wilson. They may be told it's a couple weeks out, or 2 weeks out, or 10 days out, or whatever. It is what it is. But make sure that I would say you've got to keep it in that 7 to 10 day range. Sooner is, don't commit to anything sooner or write anything sooner than 7 days without checking with a home inspection, with the home inspector that's likely to do the inspection.
If you miss any of these dates by even a day, does that reach this offer?
It depends. Depends on which paragraph, which contingency you're talking about, what are the words in that contingency. Okay, so if you miss the date in the inspection clause, what are you asking me? So I missed the date, meaning what? I haven't done the inspections, or I haven't responded, or what? Just the way this reads, this says the following. Hi, Mr. Seller. If you accept my offer, you're giving me the right to do the inspections of my choice. Here's a couple of the types of inspections I might choose to do. And I'm going to do those inspections on or before the date identified in this paragraph, whatever that is. I also have 24 hours after that date, up to 24 hours after that date, to respond. My response can be one of the following. If I find something unsatisfactory to me, I can walk away and get my money back. I might decide, if I find something unexpected, come back to you and ask you to fix it, ask for you for a credit, whatever the case may be. You can choose not to, and then I'll have to decide whether I'm still going to move forward or not, but that's what this paragraph says. It also says that if I don't do anything, and I just let the date run, and I don't do any inspection, and I never respond to you, that I'm waiving my rights under this agreed upon contingency by the end of that 24-hour period after that date.
It's funny, you were actually talking with that. So Matt just emailed me because he called Dana to schedule the home inspection. So he's going to do it on Monday. So it just has to be someone from our team there to represent him, right? So I could send one of the new agents if they're available to attend on my behalf.
In all honesty, to a home inspection, there's no requirement under law that the real estate, the buyer, agent working with the buyer is there. As a customary practice, we do that, especially with first-time home buyers, right? Because we want to be there. But my function at a home inspection is nothing more than opening the door, making sure the buyer's been introduced to the home inspector. I usually will coach the buyers and say, hey, I know this is your first inspection. Here's the process. You're a first-time home buyer. You've done this 100 times. This is the inspector's show. It's got nothing to do with me. If I see something that I think warrants some inquiry or some inspection by the inspector, I'll mention it to you, but this is all about him. In fact, I'm going to take a step back. I may listen, I may ask some questions, but this is all about the inspector.
Sweet. That's perfect. It's Dana doing it anyway, so
Yep.
I'm sure he'll be fine with it.
Sure.
Sweet.
All right, questions on the home inspection. You're going to use the length of that time period to fit the situation of the deal. And again, when we look at what we've done on John, I'll explain what we did, why we did it, explain how it's manifested itself into something else as a result. Okay. Paragraph C is, or paragraph 4, item C, which is the purchase and sale. The purchase and sale should be approximately 2 business days, 2 to 3 business days, your choice, from the date that's specified in the home inspection period. Why? Because the date in the home inspection period says, here's the date I have to get the inspections done by. I have another 24 hours to make some decisions. If you write for the purchase and sale to be on that date or within that 24 hours, you're playing with a lot of moving parts. Let the contingency get done, make sure you've negotiated the deal, give yourself an extra day, sign the purchase and sale. There's no reason to drag that out. If you eliminate or waive the home inspection, then your purchase and sale date just gets compressed into probably 3 to 4 business days from the date of offer, because there's no reason to delay the purchase and sale. Questions? Paragraph 5, the financing contingency. The first date is the date, it's called the application date. What's the date that the buyer is required to formally file their application by? Okay, again, you're going to need a signed purchase and sale to be able to do that. So I would make D to be 1 to 2 business days after the purchase and sale signing. Right? Doesn't make sense. Now, would you ever, here's the question for you, would you ever have an application date prior to the signing of a purchase and sale? You might. You could. There's nothing saying you can't, but it's going to be an extenuating circumstance where the whole transaction is compressed so that you have to get that process started sooner rather than later. Some places may be a guaranteed rate, and others, but few and far between, will start the process with just a signed offer.
Is that the same as like a pre-commitment? Would you have to apply?
The pre-commitment means you've already applied, right? And the concept of a pre-commitment is you've applied and you've already gotten a commitment subject only to an appraisal and maybe a condominium approval if it's a condominium. Okay. So the next line in there is what's the amount your loan to value. It can be stated as either a dollar amount or a percentage amount. Again, I generally do it as a percentage because it's one less thing to have to change if we renegotiate the price. Okay. And then E is the date of commitment. And that should be anywhere from 15 to 20 business days from the date of application. So do you see how these dates kind of feed off of each other in sequence? You have to keep that in mind. Because if you put a purchase and sale date of today, an application date of tomorrow, and a commitment date of 2 weeks, you will never, in this environment, get a commitment in 2 weeks. Even if you have a pre-commitment, you won't get it. Okay? And then we jump to closing. F is typically what the buyer's desired date. Now, I put a little caution in there. It should not be any less, where possible, unless the property is vacant, than 2 weeks from the commitment date. Okay? Now let's flip and put your listing hats on for a moment. When you're a listing agent, you have the same responsibility to manage these dates and negotiate these dates that are in the best interest of your seller, right? We've just written an offer in the best interest of a typical buyer in a balanced market, okay? When I am negotiating on behalf of the seller, the only time I want to see expanded timeframes in an offer is the date between the commitment date and the closing. Why? Why would I want more time for a seller between commitment date, the date that the buyer's attorney, the buyer's lender says you're approved, ready to go, and the closing?
More time to move out,
Say it out loud.
more time to move their stuff out.
More time to prep and get ready to move out, because the deal really isn't done until you have a commitment in hand. Is it possible the buyer gets denied commitment? Yes. How often does it happen? Not very often, but it's possible. Okay? Having a commitment date of today and a closing date of tomorrow, one, the banks typically need at least 3 to 4 business days in between, if they can even do it that. Most banks will tell you they need at least a week. Okay? Now, does that change from situation to situation? Sure does. How so? Because there's a need of the seller to be out by a certain time, okay, then they're going to take that risk. The property may be vacant, so it really doesn't matter to the seller, they're already gone. So you might be able to put that commitment date closer and the closing date closer together.
What is, going back, sorry,
Yep.
E, what is TRID again? I forget.
TRID, I forget what the acronym stands for. TRID was put into place on October 3rd, 2015, if I remember correctly. And it basically is related to the third page of the offer, which is the integrated mortgage disclosure. TRID was a significant change in the lending laws resulting from the collapse and the issues that occurred in 2007, 8, and 9. And basically what it's saying is that the lender has a definitive legal requirement to provide written disclosures to the borrower in certain time frames. So within an application, they have to get certain disclosures within a certain time frame. More importantly, they have to get those disclosures within, they also have to be given what's called a good faith estimate, which is the lender saying, you know, here's your estimated closing costs. They have to be given another set of disclosures, the closing disclosures, et cetera, no less than 3 business days prior to the closing. What the integrated disclosure addendum says is that if that doesn't happen, the buyer and the seller agree to extend the closing to allow that to happen. Again, since this comes out, I think I've seen it once in all the transactions we've done in the last 5 years. Okay? Okay, and then I have, back on page 4, I have these additional thoughts. Typically, it's best to identify your closing date and work backwards. What do I mean by that? Well, you can do it sequentially if we just went through it, but if you've got a compressed closing date, do you see how that's going to impact this prior sequencing of dates before that? So it is good to kind of say, what's your preferred closing date? Or, hey, does the seller, I always pick up a phone, or at least try, won't say always, but I try to pick up a phone if I know I'm going to write an offer and I have a conversation that goes like this with the listing agent. Hi, my buyer has expressed interest. They're contemplating an offer. I never want to say, yes, you're getting an offer. They're contemplating an offer. Can you answer me a couple questions? One, do you have any offers on the property? They have to tell you whether they do or don't. They don't have to tell you how many. Okay. And they have to tell you that they do or don't, because that's part of the code of ethics. If they're not a realtor, then they don't have to tell you. Second question, does the seller have a preferred closing date? And if so, what is it and why? Third, I noticed that there wasn't a seller's description of property or a seller's disclosure in MLS, or there wasn't a lead paint, or there wasn't this, or there, I'm missing condominium. Do you have that information readily available?
Seller's
Seller's disclosure. Is there anything else that you think the buyers need to know as they contemplate making an offer, if they make an offer, that they should consider moving forward? Now, this becomes slightly different conversation when we're not in the seller's market and we're in a buyer's market, right? I'm probably not going to say what else should the buyer know, because you're going to be in a better position to make demands, not try to acquiesce to what the sellers are.
So in this market, you would ask?
I would absolutely ask, right? Because every piece of information that you can gain to incorporate in that offer is going to make your offer that, remember, what are you trying to do? The point of negotiating is getting to a point that both parties can accept the deal. If you know what they're looking for, isn't it easier to direct your buyer and say, if you want it, this is what it will take? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then the additional terms and conditions are just that. They are the additional terms and conditions. That could be something like all appliances included as per MLS. Seller to provide Title V report prior to closing, whatever the additional terms and conditions. Right? Your contingency examples that I sent out the other day, electronically. Madison, you wouldn't have gotten them. Julie, you probably didn't get them because I didn't include you because I'm just doing to the distribution list. But those are some of the more common ones. So if you need them, use those first. If you need something else or you need them tweaked, then come see me and I'll help you write any and all the contingencies accordingly.
I just missed that. What was the paperwork?
It's something called a contingency example. So it's just, over the years, I've accumulated some of these contingencies that aren't pre-written in here, that have been used and vetted and looked at by attorneys and approved by attorneys, so you can just kind of cut and paste them and use them,
Okay.
versus you trying to come up with some creative language. If you have to, you have to. I prefer you don't. Right? I prefer I help you, or I have Lillian help you, or just to make sure that we're not putting undue risk on our buyer. Okay? Questions about the time frames. Now, again, this minute that you're a listing agent, this all kind of reverses a little bit, right? I'm going to want things maybe a little bit earlier. I want to make sure that I need to negotiate everything in this offer. Everything in this offer is negotiable. The deposit amounts, the timing of the deposits, the timing of the contingencies, what the contingencies are, every single point is negotiable. Don't let anybody tell you it's not. Okay? But whatever you write in there makes a statement. If you put a $100 deposit followed by a $100 deposit, what's that story that you're telling the seller? Buyers don't have a lot of cash in hand, and that could raise a red flag for the seller. Okay, yes, sir.
Is the only advantage to all cash offer for the seller being that there's no chance that financing would be denied? I mean, because otherwise they're getting the money either way, right? So it's only that they're not going to worry about the financing being denied.
So what represents? I like to talk in terms of risk, right? You'll hear me refer to the balancing of risk in a transaction. You're trying to balance risk in your offer to limit the risk to your buyer, and maybe putting more risk towards the seller, depending on who you represent. You're trying to limit the risk, right? So what's the risk in financing versus cash?
Could be that they get denied, or well, I guess, whether they get denied, if they actually get approved for less than they thought, and also if the appraisal comes in and the buyer has to make up the difference, they don't have it, or if they would have to negotiate.
So you have
the price.
appraisal risk, the property might not appraise, that could cause some problems for everybody.
Mhm.
You could have the risk of denial, right, or lack of approval or non-approval. If somebody were to get approved for less, it doesn't really help the situation. They're not gonna be able to close unless they have an extra pile of cash,
Mhm.
right? So you have these risks that are built into financing. By going cash or not having a financing contingency, which are two different things, don't mistake the lack of a financing contingency in an offer as meaning the offer is cash. Doesn't mean the offer is cash, it just means that the offer is not contingent upon financing.
How would a buyer do that? If they don't make a contingent on financing, they get denied, they don't have the money laying around.
Then they're gonna lose their deposit.
If it's not contingent on financing, then they can provide cash, but cash straight up is different.
Not necessarily.
If it's not contingent on financing and they get denied the financing for it,
Well, hold on, if it's not contingent upon financing, does that make it a cash deal?
no,
Okay, correct. Why?
because it's just saying that
It's not
the
contingent
deal still
upon
has to go
financing.
through.
I am not making my purchase of your house, Madison, contingent upon me getting financing. I'm just telling you I'm gonna purchase my house. Now, why would I do such a thing? Well, one of two things, right? I do have cash and I can afford to buy it, or I'm so confident in my ability to get my loan that I don't want to displace that risk onto you, Ms. Seller, because I'm in a multiple offer situation. So I'm willing to take the risk as a buyer and just not make my offer contingent upon financing, but I'm still gonna go get financing. Can I still get denied? Sure can. What happens if I get denied and the offer was not contingent upon financing? I'm screwed. I'm gonna lose whatever money I have in the deal, period. Right? Because I can't go back to the seller and say, I didn't get my financing. He's gonna say, doesn't matter to me, you didn't make the offer contingent upon financing. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so remember that the removal of the financing contingency doesn't automatically equate to it being a cash deal. It just means that the offer is not contingent upon the buyer getting financing. Buyer can still go get financing. The buyer can go rob a bank for all I care. However they want to get the money, it doesn't matter to me as a seller because it's not impacting me. I have no risk to it. The risk is granted to the buyer. The only other time that you see financing waived would be, he used the word pre-commitment. Pre-commitment is a process by only a few lenders do it, where you as the buyer go and apply for your loan ahead of an offer. They do all of the underwriting and approve you for the loan, except for the appraisal on the property, because we don't know what property it is yet. And if it's a condominium approval, because there's an approval process of that. So I have actually written offers that say, we're waiving the financing. And then as soon as you do that, the listing agent, the less sophisticated listing agents are going to say, oh, this is a cash deal. No, it's not a cash deal. But what you're going to say to them, because if you're a listing agent, what's the one thing you're always going to require your sellers have before they before they accept an offer? I want a legitimate, confirmed pre-approval, or I want what's called a letter of sufficient funds. If it is a cash deal, I want a letter of sufficient funds. I get an offer on a listing where it's not contingent upon financing, I'm going to ask, is this a cash deal? If the agent says, yes, it is, great. I want a letter of sufficient funds from the institution where the monies, the cash, pile of cash reside. And I want the manager's signature saying that as of that date, that money was there. Sometimes you're going to get agents that go, well, it's not cash, but we're not making a contingent upon the financing. Okay, great. Then give me something. Show me at least a pre-approval, preferably a pre-commitment that they've been ready to go. Okay? See how confusing this stuff gets?
Yeah.
Very quickly. Okay, and this is the stuff they don't teach you in real estate school.
I heard from someone, I forget who it was, maybe, that when submitting an offer, say someone was pre-approved for $750, but they love this house for $600 and they're gonna renovate it or something, that you would want to get another letter of pre-approval that was for less, so that it doesn't like show your hand of being able to afford much more.
I generally prefer when I'm submitting an offer that the pre-approval reflects the property. If you're working with guaranteed rates, they'll almost always do it for you. I would prefer it to be property specific, meaning it has the address of the property on there and the amount in the pre-approval, reflects what the purchase price is.
Oh, okay, so it'd be for the exact amount
That would be preferred.
that you're offering.
Logistically, sometimes it's not possible.
What's the turnaround time roughly?
I have emailed Sean, and usually I emailed him Sunday when I first wrote the offer, and I had it within 30 minutes, right? Other lenders aren't necessarily that available. If it's Quicken Loans, if it's JP Morgan, if it's Citizens, don't count on getting anything over a weekend.
Yeah.
Unless you have an extraordinary loan officer. There are times, so for example, when I write an offer with an escalation clause, I get the pre-approval to reflect whatever that cap is in the escalation clause, because otherwise you're gonna have to do it twice, right? And if you're trying to show legitimacy, remember, I want your offers when they get submitted, I want the agent to go, holy crap, they got their shit together. Oh, there I go in person again. I want to make sure that your offers are properly written with all the appropriate disclosures, documentation, and everything else that needs to be in there, so that when it gets submitted, the agent is just going, okay, these people are on the ball. Why? Because that's a reflection of your buyer. I can't tell you how infuriating it is, even in multiple offer situations, to get an offer from an agent, it's just the offer, but they didn't get all the disclosures and all this. Now, we've gotten many more of the offers you get on your listings will now be almost always will have everything, because we've gone to great pains on every offer, on every listing, and then else we say, here are the offer instructions, please do this. We literally tell them what we're looking for.
The other good thing too is that by putting together such a solid offer and not forgetting anything, in the future, if that agent ever has a listing that you want to put an offer on, they'll kind of prioritize you if they know that you're a good agent, because they work with you in the past.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been in multiple offer situations. My buyer has lost out, and I get a call 3 days later, hey, Eric, really liked working with you last time in your office. The first offer didn't walk through. Your buyer, they weren't first offer, but we know who you are. We know that it can get through, because a lot of times these first offers, buyers usually get cold feet. The pre-approvals weren't worth the paper they were printed on, or other issues. So your reputation, A, by working in this office, and B, the reputation you build by doing exactly what he just said, is worth its weight in gold over the course of your career. Even if it gets one deal done for you, it's worth its weight in gold. Okay, so let me go to my.
When there's an escalation clause, what proof does the what proof does the listing agent have to provide that there actually were offers for certain amounts?
In our world, our escalation clause requires them to provide a copy of the bona fide offer, meaning a real offer that shows what caused the escalation to go to whatever price it goes to.
Okay.
Sorry.
If you just click advanced, you'll see your show.
Yeah.
The grading's weird today. What?
At least you have it.
You scroll down a little bit.
Reload.
It's hidden by the,
I hit.
if you just type HTTPS before the domain, it'll, should let you. Or do it without the HTTPS, actually. Oh, that's weird. Click on the three dots on the right, the top right, and then just click on New Incognito window. It'll definitely let you in there.
I'm knowledgeable.
Sometimes.
Sorry, bear with me.
No worries.
Ooh.
Julie, how are the chicken pox?
Well, she left with her dad today, so they're a little bit better. I think they spread a little bit, but I'm just hoping that they're contained when I see her again on Thursday.
Oh, yeah.
Monday. Sunday, here we go. All right, so
At 4.
I went back, so I'm going back to the 91 John Street listing that we just went through, so if we need to refer back to it, we will. So I put together an offer on this property, and here was the email that I sent over with the offer packet, the pre-approval, and the check. Now, normally I would have combined those all into one PDF, which is always better and always preferred, because I personally hate getting lots of them, but I was doing it from my phone and in the car, and it makes it a little bit more difficult because I'm not as technically adept as most people. So Matt, listing agent Matt, I'm pleased to submit my buyer's offer on the above referenced property. As you will see, they are terrific buyers in so much as they have nothing to sell and can be flexible with the seller's preferred closing, inclusive of the seller's need to find suitable housing. I left you a message as I wanted to get some additional insight on the architect letter. So when we were at the open house, he had referenced that they had had some structural work done at the property, or somebody did. They had an architect come in and kind of certify the work that was done. So that's what that refers to. And I have a few other minor questions. Please confirm receipt of this offer, critical, and the ability to review by replying to this email or via text. Also, please note the response time on the offer. Okay, so here's the offer. What I didn't get to do, so my buyers and I saw the property on Friday. We had an ongoing dialogue on Saturday because I had gotten an email or text from Matt. Make this as realistic as possible, bear with me. Inspection office have signed up office and okay. All right, so the response I got to him, let's see. So I got an email from him on Saturday morning saying, hey, just want to let you know if your buyers, I saw your comments because I had left feedback for him just saying the buyers were thinking about it, but it's one of several properties. And he came back to me and said, my sellers are very motivated. Okay, so how would you interpret that?
They'll accept whatever you throw at them.
Mm-hmm.
Or it sounds to me like they're certainly not going to they're not in a multiple offer situation, for sure, right? This is Reading, $520,000 property. This should have flown off the market within hours, and it didn't. So I shared that with the buyers. The buyers went back and forth. We had a conversation on Sunday morning. This is what resulted. I tried to call him Sunday morning to say I wanted to find out about the seller situation, this house, the subject to seller finding suitable housing. I wanted to see if there was a preferred closing date. I just wanted to get some more information about what was going on. And so this was the offer. Julie, can you see the offer?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so here's the offer that I wrote. So I wrote it on Sunday. Here's all the information. We wrote the offer. What was the listing price? $519. So my buyer said, well, you know, I don't want to insult them, but I don't feel I should go in at asking price. So what would you offer, Eric? Got nothing to do with me. It's what you're comfortable with. I'll do anything, but I believe, my humble opinion, looking at this property and doing a comparable analysis for you, this property really shouldn't be above $500,000 in my humble opinion. And the market is telling us a story about this property because it's in Reading. It's been on the market for 10 days. The seller's motivated. They've had multiple open houses. They have people circling, but so on and so forth. So we decided to go in at $490, $1,000 balance of $5. Notice the time. Okay, what does that say? 6 p.m. on 9/20. Why did I want to do that? Because he keeps telling me there are all these people circling and all these people interested, so is it possible for somebody to come in with an offer at 500 or 510 or something close to the asking price the seller just takes? So I'm trying to force a response because I don't want the offer to be out there or be beat out because I'm still in that potential for multiple offers.
When did you submit this? What time was it?
So this was submitted at, I want to say about 11:30.
So they're allowed to say motivated, but they're not allowed.
I would never say that.
That's so weird.
If I say to you, my seller's motivated, doesn't that immediately imply that they'll take something less than full price?
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Not, unless my sellers approve me saying that, I'm never gonna say that.
Yeah.
Okay? So we do that. Here's the inspection. I wanted to keep it. Remember, this is the 20th, so that's a 9-day inspection period, well within, under the norm of the 10-day. We're going right to purchase and sale within 2 days. And again, some of the other things that I'm looking at that we haven't taught you yet, but you need to keep in mind, never try to avoid signing purchase and sales on Fridays. Why? Because the purchase and sales inevitably have to get approved by the attorneys, and they inevitably wait till the end of the day to do these things. And if it's 5 o'clock on Friday, they're probably going to extend till Monday. The more time, if there's an extension, the extension opens up liability for you and your buyers that something might go wrong. We've certainly had extensions on closings, extensions on commitments, extensions on purchase and sales that had we not given the extensions, the deal would have stayed together. But deals have fallen apart. So extensions are not good. They're a necessary evil sometimes, but they're not good. We go from purchase and sale to application. They're financing 85%. We're going to go to a closing of that. Not a closing, a commitment of the second. And we're going to do a closing on November 30th. I've asked for it to show what? See addendum A and B. This offer, and I also reference in here that this offer is subject to the buyer's satisfactory review of the architect's letter that was discussed. It was never provided. It wasn't in MLS. I didn't have access to it, but I wanted them to do that prior to signing purchase and sale. Okay. We go down to the addendum. The first addendum, I always want to make sure that always do a, in this environment, do a letter. Even though we knew we weren't in a competitive situation, I still wanted to make it personal. I have letter templates that you can use and give to your buyers. These tend to be fairly effective more often than not. But if you're going to do a letter from a buyer, label it as an addendum so it's attached to the offer. Because it is possible that if you don't do that, you might get a less than professional listing agent. There's more than a few of them out there that doesn't share the letter. In fact, Lillian will tell you, she had an agent last week that specifically says, we don't give buyers offers, we don't give sellers letters from buyers. You will if it's an addendum, because it's an addendum. It's part of the offer now. Okay, nobody else does that, but that's a little trick we learned years ago.
And they legally have to show them an addendum, even if it's a letter.
You have to show them the offer.
They've got to show them everything in the offer. Now your letter is part of your offer. By making an addendum as part of your offer. If they don't show it, they're in big, big trouble.
So I'm sure they were surprised to get that from Lillian. She's probably just said, all right, will be an addendum then.
Yeah. Addendum B was the following. So we went on to explain that buyers have nothing to sell and can be flexible to the seller's preferred closing date. It's more of a statement than a condition, but I want it in the offer because I want these people I want the seller to hear it from the buyers directly through the offer. All appliances and exclusions per MLS, and you'll see that as I scroll down, the MLS is in there and the buyers have initialed it because I always want the MLS in there. Always print out the MLS with the compensation the day of the offer. Because every now and again it changes when it shouldn't. Then I'm saying it's mutually agreed and understood the sale is subject to the seller finding suitable housing. A, it's further agreed and understood that the seller here in the shall have 30 calendar days from the signing and accepting of this offer to secure suitable housing as evidenced by a signed purchase and sale agreement, a copy of which is to be provided to the buyer within 48 hours of said document being signed. What is that saying? Is that saying, hey, we get you have to go find a house, but we're not going to give you an open-ended check. You have to get it done within 30 days, okay? And when you do, you got to give us a copy of it to prove it. 2, the other caveat here is that in the event that the signed purchase and sale agreement on said suitable housing is noted in paragraph, actually 3, I wrote it wrong, is not executed by the above date, this offer shall be null and void. So again, If what, then what? We're giving you this opportunity to go find this property. You have to get this purchase and sale signed. And guess what? If you don't, then this offer goes away, unless both parties agree to it in writing. Okay, so that's the offer, right? As I go down, here's the lead inspection. Notable, please note, because it's a talking point right now. Please note that they reserve their right to do a 10-day inspection. We haven't gone through lead paint. That's one of our next topics. Okay. Here's the floor plan. Whatever is in MLS, I include it. I put it in the packet. I make sure the buyer initials it. There's the easement that we talked about. Okay. I have the buyer's initial it. There's the MLS. I have the buyer's initial it. That's all part of my packet. Anything that seller's given me for information, I put in the offer packet and I have the buyer's initial it. Why? So there's no question about what got shared with whom and when. It's for your protection and everybody else's. Here's the responses that I got. That got sent at 11:30. I followed it with a voice. I called him, did not respond. I texted him. He did not respond. So I sent out my first text at 11:29, saying I have a couple questions for you. Give me a shout. At 12:23, I sent out the offer. Please confirm receipt. At 2:05, having left 2 voicemails, 1 text, and sent him an email, I still hadn't heard from him. I say to him, Matt, you received the offer. Just a bit concerned. I've not heard from you. Please confirm whether you've received it. That was at 2:05. At 2:07, yes, I will review, listen to the language. Yes, I will review the offer in 2 hours or so. Sorry, I'm tied up for the next 2 hours. Where were you the prior 2 hours? Okay. Maybe. Okay. I say, and again, I'm not trying to beat him over the head. Could I? Sure. Would I be justified? Sure. But is it going to help my offer? No. Okay. No problem. Do you have any other offers in hand? That was at 2:14. He responded at 3 o'clock. Nothing in hand. We'll talk to the seller this afternoon and get you a response. I'll call you and answer any questions as well. I respond a minute later. No worries. Appreciate the follow-up. I get a text a minute later. Not going to be able to get a response by 6 p.m. today. A minute later. So how did that happen? 5.5 hours is tough. I understand, which is why I was trying to get a hold of you 2 hours ago. That said, what are the sellers asking for in terms of a response time? Got fingers.
Hasn't even talked to the sellers about it.
Right. He hasn't even talked to the sellers about it. So well, you're supposed to. So an hour later, he responds and says, I need to review it. I need to send it over for sellers to review. So we're now at 4 o'clock. 5 hours is unrealistic. No, it's not. If you actually get it to him, 5 hours.
Yeah, he's talking about 1 hour.
We're talking about 2 hours now, right? Because it was 6 o'clock. Probably need until 9 p.m. Okay, I will confirm with the buyers that works. Thanks, not trying to delay. It's really tight timeline on a Sunday afternoon. I didn't want to comment and figure out whether he's watching football. Said, understood, buyer's okay with 9 o'clock. 9:09 p.m. Matt, is there a seller's response yet? I get a response. Sorry, I turned my phone off. I get a response at 10 p.m. I tried calling you. No shit, I don't care. I don't answer my phone at 10 o'clock at night. He wants to think about it a bit. I didn't get home and get a chance to review it until late tonight. He's going to call me in the morning, right? I wake up 6:07 a.m. You call me when I'm in bed. I call you when you're in bed. I pass this along to the buyer. Please call me once you hear from the seller. Okay. What time do you think I heard from?
Like 1 or
11:48. There you go. 11:48. Sorry for the delay. And again, that's after yet another message, a voicemail, another call, and just saying, hey, I'm looking for an update. Right. I'm trying to be urgent, but not show desperation.
Right.
And my buyers are freaking out because they're first-time home buyers. They don't understand that people.
so rude.
But get used to it, right? So sorry for the counter offer. Here's what's critical. Sorry for the delay. Have a counter offer for you. Critical. Listen to the language. If they are not planning on doing the lead paint test, can you send over an updated lead paint disclosure? Not trying to be pushy on the home inspection, but hoping that can be done ASAP. Timeline is tight on the purchase on the back end. 509 counter, so they came down 10. Okay, we're at 490, they were at 520. 925 inspection, that's Friday. I'm getting this yesterday afternoon or yesterday at 11:48 a.m. purchase and sale by the 30th, mortgage application by the 30th, commitment by the 21st, the 28th of October for close. Okay, let me pass it along. Okay, so I have a conversation with him, and he's emphasizing this thing about the lead paint.
Yeah.
What do you think that's all about?
Something weird.
You said it, I didn't. So I had the conversation with my buyer. Here's what this is. It makes me uneasy with this little comment about the lead paint. They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, my experience is a handful of times there's a contingency of agents that advise their sellers or misinformed sellers that think that they can negotiate out a lead inspection. Well, why would somebody want to do that? Well, the issue is that you opt to go do a lead inspection and lead is found. One, that report goes to a copy that goes to the seller by law. A copy goes on file with the state, and the buyer has a copy. You as the buyer decide there's so much lead in there, you might ask the seller to remediate it. What's the seller gonna say to you? Right? Go away because I'm moving. Why do I want to go spend $10,000 or whatever it is to remediate it? And now you might pull out of the deal, and they are going to be required by law to do what?
Disclose the.
Not fix, well,
Disclose on.
disclose it in MLS. To Madison's point, in this particular case, there are children under the age of 6 living in that house.
I'm not gonna be living for long.
They might have to go fix it.
They do
Technically, well, we'll get into lead paint, but
But they do have children in that house?
they do have children under the age of 6. And their disclosure says what? I have no knowledge and I have no documents, which means what? Is there lead paint or not? Who knows? We don't know because we don't know yes or no because it's not been tested.
I know.
So, but think about the ethical aspect of this, which I spent hours on yesterday with my buyer saying, listen, essentially, in my humble opinion, in my experience, they're asking you to waive that inspection because they don't want to know. I'm telling you, that's not the right way to do this. Here's what I would suggest to you. Let's talk about lead paint. Let's understand what it is. You're a young couple. You're planning on having kids. This is what this will mean for you. This is what your obligations are, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into lead paint. Not right now. And so my buyers say, okay, Eric, let's go with the following. So I go back to the agent. Here's my buyer's response to your seller's counteroffer. $500,000 firm. They have spoken with the inspectors and the lender and can meet all of the seller's requested deadlines. So we can then get an inspection scheduled and done by the 25th. We spoke with Shant, who he also knows and does a lot of work with because his office is literally right next to it. And Shant can get the commitment date done and can get to the closing. Sorry, just getting a call. I just want to go. Okay. Let's see. So their intent is clear. They do intend to do a lead inspection because it's important to them, and they can even get a lead inspector there within the next 48 hours because I have them call a lead inspector and meet the inspection deadline. If this is acceptable to the seller, I will get it rewritten, re-signed, and sent over ASAP. Please confirm receipt and text and let me know when to expect a response. Of course, please call with questions. That was at what time? Let's see. Just to set the stage.
Yes, sorry for the delay.
2:27 p.m., 3:41. He responds that received. Will send to the seller now. Thanks. 7:04 p.m. Matt, just checking to see when we might reasonably expect a response. 7:04, immediate response. Tonight, he's coaching his son's T-ball. Said he would call me after when he gets home to respond. Okay, thanks. Didn't get a response until 8:48. The response is they're going to reject the offer.
They don't.
Okay, if anything changes, let me know. I decide that I'm going to call him again because I fell asleep on the couch. I call him at my usual time, which is 5:21 a.m. and say, Matt, thank you. Can you please share the specifics of why the offer was rejected so I can afford the buyers a proper explanation? He responded at 10 a.m. Just looking for better price and terms.
Yeah, a long night.
Just looking for better price and terms with clients. So again, I respond to him. I just left you a voicemail. Could you please give me the call so we can have a conversation? I've had a dialogue with the buyer and they potentially will come back, but I need to better understand the seller's perspective because I don't want to waste your time or mine or theirs. So ultimately, he calls me back and the conversation goes like this. Eric, how are you? Sorry, I have no clients, blah, blah, whatever the excuses are. I said, great. So tell me where we're at. I got your text and it says that they wanted better terms, a better price. So is it about price or is it, and I was very bold, or is it about the lead paint? Now, no agent worth their salt would ever say, sure, it's about the lead paint. Well, you know, they were concerned about not so much. It was really about the price. And I said, well, because that's odd because you're listed at 520. We came in at 490. You responded to our offer at 490 by saying 510. We'd come back to you. Why wouldn't they just say 510? Well, you know, they just didn't want this to drag on and we potentially have some other people and so on and so forth. So I'm talking to him about this and I said, well, let me tell you where my folks are. But he goes, well, I just want to make it clear for you. The seller's perspective is really about price. I actually just got off the phone with him as well, and we're prepared. Listen to what I'm about to say to you. He goes, we're prepared. We're probably either today or tomorrow going to lower the price to $499.9. And the seller's expectation is that they'll probably do that and generate multiple offers and drive the price up. I said, well, let me ask you a question. You just told me it was about price, so I'm guessing it wasn't about price. So here's what my buyers are prepared to do. They're sticking at 500. They can meet all of the dates that the seller wants. By the way, you're telling me that a seller signed a purchase and sale last night on their new home, so they're now under the gun. The buyers are willing to waive the lead paint. Seller either wants it or not, but I don't believe, in my humble opinion, I'd appreciate if you could go back and share this with them because I don't believe it's about price because they wouldn't lower it to $499.9 with an offer of $500 in hand because guess what? Even if you get multiple offers and drive the price up, nobody's going to be able to close it in 37 days, which is the time frame that you're asking for. I get a call back an hour later that says, well, you know, we've got a couple, and he just sent it again. He just sent it, congratulations, I just sent you an offer. I got 4 more buyers that are interested in it. So what? You just accepted an offer at 500. But he came back and said, well, the buyer wants to counter. I said, don't bother countering. Just don't bother countering.
So he accepted it
So they ultimately accepted the offer.
with the lead paint thing?
The buyers decided to waive the lead paint.
Oh.
Okay. And my response to the buyers were, do you feel like you're being pressured into this? Because if you are, I'm going to ask you to walk away from the deal. I don't want you to feel pressured that you have to waive if this lead paint is that inspection is that important to you, then keep it in there. If you're willing, the risk to you is that you waive it to get the deal done. It doesn't change your responsibility when you own that property. When you have children that are living in that property, you now are responsible for providing a lead compliant environment because a child under the age of 6. The issue of doing an inspection, you'll have to do one, you know, in theory, you'll have to do one, and you'll have to, in theory, remediate if needed. Lots of people don't do them because look at what the sellers did. The sellers never did one. They now have children under the age of 6 that are living there, and it probably explains why they're having a hissy, they're making an issue of the offer, not necessarily about lead paint, but it seems to be about the lead paint.
Yeah.
I want to know if you'll find out.
What's that?
I want to know if you'll find out if there's actual lead paint there.
Well, I won't. The only way to do it is you have to have a test, and there's 2 ways to test it. There's a chemical test, which is rarely done these days, and now it's done by a handheld X-ray machine. And it literally, a house, 1,400 square foot house, would probably take 3 hours to do that inspection.
Yeah.
Because they're literally, we'll get into lead paint. I don't want to get into it right now.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll just pop in a little.
So the point of doing all of this is you can see how the offer was presented. We wrote the offer in such a way that we thought we were trying to show the seller our willingness to be urgent in dealing with these things, that we were willing to bend on some things because we're going to be flexible to your date. They came back, albeit with a cryptic response. Ultimately, instead of me I could have certainly, because I do it very well, ask them, they'll tell you. I can grandstand with the best of them and pound my fist and hold my breath and stamp my feet and stand there and tell you how righteous I am because I figured out it was a lead paint issue, but one of two things would have happened. The agent would have told me to go F myself, or the deal would not have gotten done. So I choose, after 20 years, you finally learn something. And what I've learned is that if I don't grandstand, I'm more often likely going to get the things done that need to get done. But I will grandstand now and again. Stop. What are you laughing at?
You.
Okay.
I just love the speakerphone calls when they tell you that, boss.
Yeah.
The best is watching our deal with somebody. It's honestly one of the highlights of working here.
Maybe we should record it.
Or when you get like, when I read my dad the email he sent the people last night, and he was like, oh yeah, he really got good. That's the best.
Share the response with them. That's even better though.
Yeah. So just as an FYI, fun tidbit of the week.
Yeah.
I had an amazing transaction in the hunt. Girl was so happy, so excited. She was signed up as 3% per usual. And she knew what the rate was. We talked about it multiple times. It wasn't the first time she was putting an offer in, whatever. So we get to closing day. I don't go to the closing with her because of COVID. And because I didn't go closing with her, I didn't take my check. I didn't get the check physically. So when you go to your closing, you're going to get handed 2 checks. You're going to get the check from the list agent, your 2%, and then you're going to get your 1% from the buyer. Okay? And it's usually cut from the attorney. So because I wasn't there, I didn't physically have the checks and had to go get them. So I sent her a text. I said, hey, Nairi, how is the house? Well, she sent me a photo of us outside the house. I said, hey, Nairi, hope you had a great first weekend in your house. Just as a question, did you give them the check for the fire agency commission? And she goes, oh, yeah, I did, but I wanted to talk to you about it. Can you give me a call? I said, sure. So I call her, and she's like, hey, I just want to give you some feedback. And I said, of course. I said, that's, and it, just as a word of advice, when someone calls to give you feedback, take it graciously, be happy about it, because we can't do our jobs effectively if we don't receive feedback, okay?
Amen.
There's going to be things that you miss, and there's going to be stuff that when you hear it from a different way, you're going to feel like, oh, maybe I should have did it better, and it'll help you for the next time, okay? So always take it graciously. So I said, of course. And she's like, well, just as a first-time home buyer, in regards to the fee, she's like, I was aware of the fee. I was happy to pay the fee. I loved working with you. I didn't think you did anything wrong, but my lender and my attorney told me that I should not have been paying that fee. And that the buyer never paid for a buyer agency agreement. And that, and it made me feel funny because, I had, I'm like, well, of course, why wouldn't it make you feel funny? You just had this amazing experience with me, and now they're telling you that I wasn't worth it, or I wasn't worth the fee. And I said, she was, by no means is this me saying that I'm, I'm upset or, whatever. She's just like, I just, it just made me feel like, like I said, as a first-time buyer, there's all these things that come at you and you really don't know what they are, and, blah, 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 blah. I go, right, but you knew what it was, correct? And she's like, no, I was prepared for it. I budgeted for it. Like, I was happy to pay it. Like, but then the next day, the seller came by the house to say, ask me how the move was. FYI, the seller is the agent's brother. And said, hey, my brother told me that you had to pay a buyer agency fee. You shouldn't have had to do that. Now she has 3 people telling her that she shouldn't have to pay the fee. So think about having an amazing transaction. You're so happy. You have a great closing. You're so excited. And then someone just takes all the joy out of your closing because
Amen.
they're telling you that you will pay. So I marched my little stilettos into, Eric's office because at the end of the day, this is why we have Eric here to do these things for us, okay? Like, if you want to get emotional and you want to call and you want to get pissed off, but at the end of the day, Eric is basically an attorney at Freilich that has handled all of these things so many times, and so you want to make sure that we go through the proper channels to handle it correctly. So we went to Eric. I told him the situation. He drafted 2 emails, one to the lender and one to the attorney, asking for a formal apology. I'll read it to you. Because at the end of the day, guys, we work really hard, and
They get paid.
they get paid.
Was she saying that
Everybody
she
gets
wasn't
paid.
gonna pay it?
No, she paid.
No, she paid it.
She paid it. She was happy to pay it.
The
But the issue was that everyone was telling her
She
that
felt
she
like she was
shouldn't have.
blindsided or something?
No, she felt like she paid something that maybe she shouldn't have had to pay, based off of what these other people in her transaction are telling her.
Okay.
This is why we work with Guaranteed Rate and Sonia Salemi's office and all these people that work with us, because they know how we work. So when questions like that come up, they're prepared to answer it. However, these other attorney and lenders, they shouldn't even comment on these things because it has nothing to do with them. I said to her, it really upsets me that they have an opinion on how I should run my business. I don't tell them how to run their business. I don't tell them how to discount their fees. I don't tell them what to charge people. Why do they feel like they need to tell me how I need to charge people? Did you have a good experience? Did I work on behalf of you in the transaction? Yes, okay, well, and I was worth that 1% all day.
Yeah.
So anyway, he wrote, Nicole, that was the attorney's name. It was brought to our attention that you informed our client at last week's closing that she should not have paid our buyer agency fee due to our office, and that we should have accepted whatever fee was in MLS as our full fee. As I'm sure you realize, discussing our fees with our client is totally unprofessional, inappropriate, and represents a significant ethical issue, something we will not readily stand for. Absent an immediate written apology from you to our client, we are prepared to file a complaint with an appropriate licensing and other authorities, i.e. the Board of Overseers, et cetera, regarding this unacceptable behavior. Please let me know what to expect.
Should they get a
Love it.
response or?
Oh, boy. Eric, Attorney Nicole Mundy is asking to respond to your email. This is the head guy. As you know, we were asked to include on the buyer CD a buyer agency duty from the buyer. Since it was not the TNS, it was not part of our lender's instruction, we did call the buyer verbally confirm the line item, which she did. To the best of my knowledge, no one in my office expressed an opinion regarding this item. It would be inappropriate to do so, as you suggest. And if our attempt to verify this line item inadvertently left the buyer or anyone else with a misunderstanding, I sincerely apologize. Your efforts to bring this transaction to a successful completion are greatly appreciated by everyone, including the buyer, my office, and me. I will gladly reach out to the buyer directly and apologize for any misunderstanding. Please call me again directly if I can be of any further assistance. So, backstory, that attorney Nicole called me during this transaction and asked me about the fee. And I said, yep, it's 1% due at time of closing. Now, this is a $565,000 transaction, so it wasn't a hefty fee, $5,000. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that's what our contract states. And I said to her, 9 times out of 10, I'll get the seller to pay this for you. But whereas it was a competitive transaction, I couldn't ask for the $5,600 back. I was in a multiple offer situation, so I couldn't ask for that fee back. So they tried, and she made a comment to me, so I know that they were trying to tell her that it was fucked up. Point blank period. So at the end of the day, guys, know your contract in and out, and stand by your contract. And as long as you communicate from the beginning, what that fee is, what it's gonna be, when you should expect to pay it, why you're owed it, there should be no issue at time of closing when it comes time to collect.
Now, present situation, is the client upset? Or
No,
is
she's fine.
She's good?
Fine.
Yeah.
She was happy to pay it. I mean, I'm sure I told her, she was, I hope you're not upset, and I hope, I wanna make sure this is a good call. I said, no, it absolutely is. I said, I'm not upset with you whatsoever. I am upset, however, with the people that represented you, that told you that this was something that you shouldn't. I said, I did over 30 transactions last year, and I can assure you that every single one of my clients paid 3%. That you could go in a room with all of them, and they were all happy to. So, it's not abnormal.
You took advantage of 30 people.
Happily, they were happy to pay it.
We work hard.
No.
Like some of these clients, I just had a situation with offer I just put in just now. These people were one of my first clients I ever signed up on an exclusive a year ago. So they signed an exclusive a year ago. So now their exclusive is expired. So now I'm putting in the new offer and I had to write a new thing. And so I sent it over. I didn't call to explain the exclusive right to them again because they've already signed one with me. Sure enough, get the call. Why am I paying 3%? on top of the transaction. 3% of $703,000 is a lot of money. And I said, no, you're actually only paying one. Thankfully, the seller is taking care of 2%. Mind you, they were already signed up at 3% a year ago. Well, do we have to sign this to put the offer in with you? Yeah, you do. Oh, and I'm like, and I'm sorry, I didn't call you to explain it again, because we've already done this once. I said, but my apologies, maybe I should have done that. And they're like, well, being that it's at such a higher price point than we were originally at, they were originally at like 500,000, now they went up to 703. We can't afford the $7,000 time closing. Mind you, I've been working with them for a year. Think about a year of work and hours. So I said, well, as you know, I don't get paid every week. I don't get a monthly paycheck. And if I had to calculate all the hours we spent looking at properties over a year, $7,000 would be pennies. I mean, really. I said, but if my name's not over the door, I knew it was going to be a problem. Because sometimes it's going to be a problem. But if my name's not over the door, I can't be the one that makes the decision that gets that taken off. I said, but let me see what I can do for you. If I can do anything, I will. And I ended up talking to Lillian, and I said, listen, there's going to be a problem there. I can already tell, and I'd rather just nip it in the bud now, so I just kind of 2.5%. You can make that judgment call if you have to. But for me, and Eric will tell you, 9 out of 10 transactions I do at 3. I only take it off if I feel like it's going to be a big problem, because I don't want to deal with it. And I'd rather have 2.5 than nothing.
After a year.
Have you ever done more than 3?
Oh, well, for a list size.
Yeah, for a buy side.
No.
So my first exclusive right to buy is going to be signed with my great uncle. And we did like the disclosure. I'm going to email him and hopefully get the exclusive right to buy signed this week.
Yeah.
And he's in Texas.
Don't
So,
do it at all, right?
well, I don't
Tax
know.
commission.
I don't know what he's expecting. So I'm trying to go into this with knowing what I want, whether it's 3 or 2.5, and where this could draw on till May, and I'm doing it remotely, where I'm gonna be like running to all these places.
Yeah.
I'm doing virtual calls and stuff. Should I try to keep it at 3 or should I?
I think
Why
you should
not?
always try to keep it at 3, but for me, like with friends and family, I try to do what I can. It
Okay.
depends. I mean, it's your call. I have friends most friends I've charged 3%.
Yeah.
If
Well,
if my grandmother was shopping or my aunt or uncle, I probably would do 2.5. I still charge them a half.
I mean, that's. the
I mean,
thing.
you gotta eat.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
Dude, you're so
Yeah,
late.
You gotta break.
You guys want water, or maybe go get one?
I have one, thank you. Is it in here or downstairs?
I forgot she was still on us.
Well, yeah, because a lot of.
In here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
a lot of-
Luch, I had a quick question for the Zoom tomorrow. Is that the same as the team sales meeting, that link, or is it going to be a separate link?
I'm not sure. I'll email you though tonight.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I
I'll
gotta
see you
hang on
guys.
my phone now, but see you later.
Okay, bye.